dealing with spheres and boxes. Actually, the subject is really bringing together what we've talked about already. But the real subject is how we take and what are the elements that make us feel that something is alive and real. And that's really taking and bringing our everyday experience into the drawing. And this is the hard part, because what you're doing, and this is always the problem that we're dealing with, we're talking about translating from the object that we see to actually communicating that object. And we can't do it literally. It does not work doing it literally. In other words, what I'm saying, we're not copying the model. We're recreating the model. That's everything we've been doing is built around that idea of recreating what we're doing. In other words, the example, basic simple example of taking and using animation all the time. The first exercise in animation is taking and coming down and dealing with a bouncing ball. As it comes down, it hits a surface, and we get a squash. And then as that bounce ball rebounds, it stretches out, and then regains its shape. And the spacing between, in other words, it gives us the illusion of reality. And this is really what we're trying to do. We're creating an illusion. It's a symbol of reality. It's not the real thing. It's a symbol of it. But it's based on seeing what happens in the real world. Okay, so the idea then is taking these objects, these simple objects, and bringing to them what we see and what we experience. Now, we're saying, okay, spheres and boxes. Okay, this is basic. Okay, here you've got a ball and a box inside of a sock. Okay, what happens when you take and you twist these things? Okay, we start to feel. You can actually see the twist. Now, this actually happens. Now we feel turning. Feel the corners, feel the pull. That's exactly what happens with the figure. It's no different. You feel things starting to scrunch up. See the compression? You see the changing. You feel the corners sticking out. Okay. That's what we're talking about. And it's nothing more complicated than that. And this is really what we want to try to look at. So when we're taking in drawing now. So if I take and start out the simple idea, okay, this idea of the sphere and a box. Now, the hard part of this is the imagining that you have a sphere and a box in some kind of material. You have to actually visualize in your mind this sphere. Well, we've been doing this. It's really talking about the rib cage. Okay, and we're talking about the pelvis in a sense. But these can be any abstract forms if we want to. We have to visualize this thing as being round and being able to sense how the forms are taking in, being created by this material that's over them. In other words, what's going on here is now to take in, now I'm visualizing in my mind, I'm seeing the sphere, I'm feeling the stretch to the corner of the box. I'm feeling the stretch to the corner of the box. Then the box is in here. I feel the material pulling over. You want to be able to feel this sphere inside, and you're feeling how we're coming out to, how we feel the pull. It's the visualizing of this object underneath, the hard part. You have to really conceptualize this thing. So if I take this object here now, and if I say twist it, well, the twist then, we actually feel now the twist. Now, that twisting there, we can feel the tension pulling from the corner. We feel things. Now, the actual mechanics here are what we see and how we see it, drawing-wise. It's really a question of overlapping lines. How this line takes and goes behind that line. And in here, this is coming in front and that's going behind. If I don't get the correct overlapping, it won't work. So you have to really be consciously thinking about what's in front, what's in back. But that only happens when you can take and understand that this is an actual round, three-dimensional object. It is a squarish object. You have to actually be conscious that these are real forms, not just lines. No. Okay. So now, let me take that. Let's go a little bit farther with this now. Now, as we're taking in, okay, simple sphere and a sort of boxish form. Well, if I start out even dealing with the box, I'm just taking and dealing with two balls inside of a bag, some kind of container. Feel the surface, and you're feeling the surface. The closest I actually come to any kind of rule I would think of drawing, and that it only depends on the kind of what appropriate at the time, but is that anytime you draw a fragment of a form, you should actually be taking and thinking about the whole form. You know, this is really the basic fundamental element of describing form. When you take and draw a fragment of it, you're taking and approaching for the whole thing. So that when I'm drawing part of this, I'm actually, even if I can't see the whole thing, my mind is taking and completing the rest of it. So that when I'm drawing one volume in here, I'm actually thinking about the whole volume in here, even if I only draw a fragment of that volume. So now I'm getting the feeling of the stretching from one to the other, but I have to visualize the whole, and so any fragment I'm drawing is taking and dealing with the whole form. Now, when you start to take and dealing with the twist, then it's a matter of recognizing where the fronts are. And this is really a question of what we call, basically, it's fronting. It's understanding perspective, it's understanding the three-dimensional form, but it's taking and visualizing where things are and actually taking and drawing it. So I can take and mentally take and adjust how this is going to be by just focusing on where the front is and actually just indicating a front. So now I take and I'm creating a twist. Now I can create that twist just by drawing a line that's going over those three-dimensional volumes that I'm visualizing. But you have to visualize those three-dimensional volumes very clearly. Okay. So now as I do that, then I'm bringing in the idea of the overlapping coming through, because you're taking and making this thing turn. Well, if I take that now, and I start to add to these volumes, I just stick the block in the sock like I've done. In other words, if I just take and start to go through and say, well, we've got this block in here. And the minute I've done it, you've got corners that take and stick out. You can feel the pull of how these things go. You see, the physical world is no different than what we're doing. We recognize it up here because we see it in the physical world. We experience it. So now, as I come through and I say, well, okay, there is a block in here. And if I take and, let's say if I bend this back now. So my mind now, I'm thinking of this form here is starting to face up this way. The center is in here. And the bottom is going to be facing down. So as I start to come through, now I'm going to get it pinching back here. I'm going to feel this, I'm visualizing this whole thing, but I'm saying, well, gee, there's a block in here. What if there's a block? We're talking about corner. We're going to feel that corner pushing out. We're going to feel the corner in here. We can take and actually draw a corner and pulling around that form. So now we're starting, if I go over the form this way, I start to push this, but you get a very clear sense now that this is going up, this is taking and going in, just diagramming these forms in space. Okay. So now we're combining this. We were thinking of this pulling, fitting into that. And I could come through and I could start to render this surface so that we feel this pulling and coming down. You see how I'm actually starting to get some overlapping in here now. So visualizing all of this taking place. But I'm just dealing with a very, very simple idea now. It's not complicated. So now we've got this. Now, the minute, of course, we take and turn, I can add a corner to this. I can make this have the box inside. And so we start to really feel the pull. We can take and have the pulling from the corner of the box. So now we're feeling this pulling coming across through here. Getting this round. Well, it doesn't take an awful lot of imagination now to take and go from this now I'm visualizing everything inside here now. Now I'm coming down, the minute I start adding, let's say, a navel, you start to feel the pull coming through. You feel the fullness now, these forms. You've got these corners. Well, those corners are in the relationship along with the navel that we're familiar with as being part of the figure. So, it's a symbol. Now I can take and say, well, this is a little fuller here. Maybe we've got some stuffing going through here. And now we're feeling this pulling into the corner, but I'm hitting the corners, which are our landmarks that we've talked about. We're taking and bottom of the rib cage, corners of the pelvis. Just simple volumes and boxes. That's all you're dealing with. You know, if I take and say, well, let's start pushing this away. Start to take and we've got a simple sphere overlapping. There's going another sphere in here, but this is overlapping that. And visualizing this is overlapping, but at the same time I'm thinking that this is going away from me. So as this goes away, in other words, I'm feeling the line, so now I'm going to get a pinching here. And I start to feel this pinching. And so even if I go stretching in here, or there is stretching, but even if there's no twisting, we now are still getting an overlapping because we're getting a compressing. We're stretching on one side, the back, and we're compressing on the other side. Start to feel these forms taking and going through and around. So we're put over the form. Now, as we start take and go in. Feeling a stretch. Now all I'm doing is adding spheres. Now this is really like an extension. This is really like what we were dealing with in the last lesson, or the one before that, second lesson, where we were dealing with spherical forms. I want to carry this a little bit farther now. So here I'm just dealing with volumes. But now we want to take and combine this with the idea of the boxes and spheres. Now, here I'm just drawing simple volumes, but right away you can see how, and I just little points of reality takes and make it look like that's a real figure. It's a figure. There's no anatomy, just spheres. Now, as we go into the leg in here, I would take the back of the knee, and I'm taking and drawing the back of the knee like a box, which it is. We have the tendons in the back, take and pull, and they give us that feeling. So now we're dealing with the question of combining this sphere and the box. Now, let's take and turn this around. If I take and have here again, feel, now I'm taking and sort of getting a sense of, I'm visualizing now a form inside, overlapping volumes. I'm taking and bringing this leg out here. Now let's take and pull this leg out also. So now all I'm doing is drawing simple spherical forms coming through. You take and pull, say this leg is going down, this one coming across over here, so I'm adding the gesture that we talked about. Coming through, going across and around the form to diagram it. I'm taking and dealing with these simple volumes that we've dealt with. Now I'm going to come in and say, well, it's stretchy. We feel the corner of the rib cage, which is like the box. Now we pushing it up. You're feeling the stretching. We feel the stomach forms taking and pulling over. We feel this going under. We get it pinchy. So I'm getting the overlapping form now. I'm stretching on this side. I'm feeling the fabric coming over to the corner of the pelvis. It's like the edge of a box now. We're working it around. Now, it starts coming forward. Well, the end of the knee is really a boxish form. So now I want to take and pushing a corner. I'm really drawing the corner of that box. And I'm seeing going over the surface of that corner. So I'm literally drawing a box. And now that box is fitting into a spherical form. So now we feel this is going through. We're going around over that surface. And you feel this now fitting into another form. So I have to really be conscious of what I'm doing. Notice I'm continually going across and over the surface. But that's no different than taking and feeling how we're pulling the stretching coming across. You're always drawing and visualizing the actual surface of the form, or how you're sensing what the center of the form is, and you're taking into consideration the whole volume as you're doing the drawing. So it's not complicated again. It's just a shifting in your mind to not copying, but to taking and focusing on what are the dynamics of what's going on, what are the simple forms that you're dealing with. So now, as I keep building on this now, we take and focus on stretching. Now here we could take in what this really is, in its most simplest term, is a box fitting into a sphere, and then it's connecting on the other side. So what we're dealing with, we have to be conscious then of how one form fits into another. How we see things that are taking and going around, how we go over, And we really describe the volume and the depth by going over things. Now, within the leg, there's actually one form fitting on top of another form. So as I draw the knee here, I'm going to turn this leg. And you can feel, just by turning the box, we get a sense of the twisting that's taking place. Now, as I come through and I'm drawing this volume now, and I'm going over this surface, we can feel this continuation just by extending the line back over to here. So now we can sense this line is carried through over to here. So we actually feel this is going through. Now, in reality, of course, the thigh has an extra series of volumes in there. So we can actually come through then and think about, in here we have the thigh becomes a volume that's fitting on top of the other sphere. In other words, I'm adding a ball out here onto this. Okay. I'm coming around, it's like a series of bubbles taking, and one is on, but you have to visualize this overlapping, how one form fits into another. Now, what happens here is that actually anatomically, as you come to the pubic arch here, you have a muscle that comes out, and we actually get a very strong corner. Well, this becomes now a part of a box. You feel the tendon, it creates a line. So I'm building this thing now. I'm actually using anatomical ideas as I'm coming through, but I'm only using very simple spheres and boxes. There's nothing common. Rubens has said you can draw anything using a sphere, a box, and a cone. This is literally what we're doing now. So we're building these forms now. I'm coming through and I'm saying, well, this is a round spherical form. We feel the corners maybe can be pushing out a bit, pushing back, going over that surface, coming out. The leg goes down. You're always focused on which direction the thing is going. So as this leg goes down and goes in, well, I'm very conscious that I've got this, I'm thinking of the box here. Now, this is just going down. I can make this corner really obvious, like this is like a ball. Then I can say, well, now we're pushing down into here. We're going around and over, but it's the overlapping forms now. But I'm really doing it, but it's visualizing it as a simple volume. Pushing, going down. You can make it complex by the degree of overlapping forms or the number of overlapping forms that you create and how small you go with the form. Now, so everything we're doing now is we're working with these, finding the corners, building the form, seeing how we're taking work. But it's this squish and stretch. Now I'm going to take and push that a little bit more. Now, taking a very simple idea of squishing and stretching and thinking of just fabric overlapping these forms. Now, it's the degree of visualization that you can take to make this thing really believable. In other words, if I take now, let's just take a simple volume. Now we're thinking, okay, first, we've got this, and we're taking, and I'm really feeling now, in fact, that this is really taking and coming through here, and we're getting we are doing here a bit of a stretch going across the form. So we're thinking that you have a rib cage in here, corners, thoracic arch. You have a pelvis that's through in here, corners at least. Now, when we start to say, well, okay, we're twisting. First we get the obvious, getting the overlapping coming through. Feel this coming across, feel the way the line is going through here. Now, as I want to push this down, in other words, as I'm drawing this, I'm really thinking this is a surface. And I'm actually rendering now, feeling this ball going down. Now, as it starts to compress, the material now is wrapping from behind. And we can feel this is pushing in. As this pushes in, it's creating this. It's creating that fold. Well, when we start to really feel the pinching now, we really feel this. But this is going the other way. This is a volume. We have a corner here. This is a volume now that's going back and fitting into this. So we start to feel there's all kinds of compressing taking place here. We feel this coming up, we feel this coming through. We can take and start to create more form, but it's the degree of observation that you can bring to what you're drawing, because it's all based on observation. The artist looking at reality and then subtracting from that the things that make it work, or that we recognize. That's what we're dealing with. So now you can see where I'm making. You can really feel this pushing down. You can really feel that coming down, pushing in. We feel this is round. Feel this is pushing up through that. Now I can make this corner come out a little bit more. I can make this corner come through, and I'm combining that with this round. Now, as we feel we're coming through here, you're sensing, okay, there's a rib cage here. Now, the fabric here is taking and pulling. We got the pelvis, say, is over on this side. And the pubic arch would be here. Let's pull this round to a leg coming out this way. Got the leg stays going down here. Now, as we take and we're looking at the overlapping now, feeling the pull, something comes across. Well, maybe we really don't even see so much of the pelvis over here. Maybe these forms are taking and really pulling out. And we could get really a volume in here. But we can still get this sense of how this is coming around. Now I'm taking and working, doing this, adding a belly here. Feeling coming down, feel where the navel is at. Pulling around. So here I'm drawing over. I'm pulling, thinking of where the corner of the pelvis is behind here. So I'm pulling from that point. I'm coming over the surface. I can add more folds. I can take and pull through this. I can say, well, this is really, we're really feeling a stretching of the form here. You're thinking, see, everything here now is just imagining, visualizing what these forms are underneath. And that's really the key. You have to visualize what these things are doing. Now, as I come through here and say, okay, let's go back to this idea now of combining these boxes. Well, they come through. I say, well, okay, the knee is out here. We can do the corner. Really visualizing this is the corner of the box. And you're seeing this as a box's form. But also, this is a full form. You feel the volume now, the sphere. Well, maybe it's almost more, seeing I'm continually wrapping, going over the surface to recognize what that volume is doing. This is pushing down. So as I go over this thing, now, you can have a succession of things that are taking and overlapping. You're getting this coming down. Here, the back of the knee, I would be thinking is with those tendons coming through, is really just a strong straight that I can use. I can now visualize these things as going underneath. I'm going over. Again, it's that simple overlapping. Now, as I'm pulling, I'm taking more volumes. Now I'm fitting another volume into this. But at the same time, I want to take and make some kind of a logical chord. I'll take this line and I'll come back, and I can have a corner here. So now you can see how all of this is really coming out. I'm pulling this around. It's a volume. We're going over the surface of that volume. And we're building one thing on top of the other. So we could push. Now the idea of the corner is it's not the box is can be even a generalized thing. Now here I'm dealing with very round forms. Okay. So as I come through now, I say, well, okay, I think this is overall, let's say, to give this a little more solidity. I'm thinking of this as a box. Well, I can create the sense of the box by taking and dealing with a combination of lines that sort of add up to a corner. Now we have a very clear-cut top and side to the thing. It's a box, essentially. I could have started out with drawing this whole thing as a box to begin with. The box, we're going through here now, the idea of the box, the idea of these simple spherical forms are only tools to help you recognize what you're looking at. These are a way of manipulating, a way of approaching the thing that you're seeing. It's all illusion. This is all fantasy. It's all on a piece of paper. But the more I add to it, the more wrinkles, the more folds that I create, the more levels of forms fitting one into another, the more real it becomes, and the more believable. But it's all illusion. So as we say, we bring an arm up here, or let's put up here papers. We've got too much glue up there. You feel the pulling from a surface. You feel the stretching. You feel, now you see what I'm doing is I'm adding forms, but I'm also taking and using the overlapping. And you start to feel the stretching. Well, every little thing, again, makes it more real. But it's simple, simple volumes. We're continually looking for the corners. See, these corners, even if we can't see it here, we started out with this. I can make this even a stronger volume here by pushing the idea of the corner just like I'm doing here. So we actually are seeing that there's an edge. I'm taking and visualizing corners. I'm taking and visualizing the corner of the rib cage. It's the symmetry now of the box that takes and makes the action come through. See, a sphere, you can see a certain amount of thing going through it. Until we come through and actually take and say there's a front, we don't really feel that there's any kind of a twist taking place. But the minute you come in and start to add boxes, corners, now we start to get a sense of symmetry, which we're going here with. We get a sense of where the corners would be, takes and tells us that we're getting things that are facing in different directions. So, corners and spheres, but the real subject is the interaction between them and how you visualize the surface of the form going over these imaginary volumes. But it's all imagination. And you can create anything. You can make it very realistic, or you can be very cartoony. There is absolutely no difference in the mechanics about how you do it. It's just the amount of knowledge that you bring to it that counts. Now, even though at this time I am drawing from photographs, I take and approach it exactly the same way I would normally be taking and doing the drawing. Doing the gesture, the forms coming out and over the surface. Now, going back in, the first thing I'm really thinking about is actually visualizing this as a rib cage. And pushing out, thinking of the center. Well, the model is really giving us a twist, and she's going back in space. So start with them. I'm taking and visualizing first. This is really very, very simple overlapping volume. And this would be going down to where we're dealing with just simple spherical forms. Now, as I go back looking at this, we find that the box becomes, of course, the useful way of taking and defining where the corners of the forms are in space. So I'm thinking of where the bottom of the rib cage, this becomes an angle, which is also, in fact, you think of this as a box form. With the pelvis, looking for across the surface of the form, looking at the angle. So again, this is visualizing this as a box, as it's going back in space, as the same thing as I'm taking and coming out to the end of the knee here. I visualize this as spherical forms. The end of the knee being a box. Here I'm going around over the surface, the leg, through, seeing the end of the knee as a box form. Now, going back, around, through, legs, in this case is seen as just very, very simple volumes. Foot's back. Okay. Arm, I actually here start to think more in anatomically, in that I'm taking and visualizing the muscles, pectoralis muscles going up, going over the surface. This becomes a feeling from behind. You feel the coming in front, and the flow. The wrist I actually almost always focus as a box's form and visualize it as a transparent, so I'm drawing through it three-dimensionally. And the shoulder is coming forward, so this becomes a boxish form again. And through volumes, feel the pectoralis muscles coming off of the chest, feeling the corners, and down again, seeing the wrist as a squarish form. Now it could be oval, but I prefer the square because I get the feeling very clearly then of what direction it's going in space. Now, coming back into this, really want to feel the pressure now. We can very clearly, we can see the difference in the directions. So we're getting a very clear sense of pinching and how the forms now start to pull from these corners. So we're wrapping around. So this becomes a very clear-cut corner. The box helps us to understand what's going on more clearly. Feel this, the pull, the stretching in, feeling the forms coming out from behind. I feel the buttocks back here. Now we go over the leg, feeling the stomach coming down, pushing up against the leg. But this becomes a clear now series of round forms overlapping each other, working around. And at the same time, I'm visualizing the end of the knee, in fact, seeing the whole thing as a box form that these round forms, or the spherical forms, are working over. So these become very clear-cut corners that we're building on. Now I can take and feel the volume going over the surface, feel the forms going forward, one fitting into another. So it's these overlapping, it's the continually visualizing this interplay between the very, very round forms and the square forms. Adding the breasts on here. The head, of course, always works very well in terms of box, since we're taking and dealing with clear-cut corners. So at this stage, we're really focusing on just getting a very simple kind of lay-in of the figure. It's not complicated. It's really trying to take and deal with everything as very, very simple volumes. Okay. Now, again, first the overall view. What I try to do, particularly teaching-wise, and I suggest as a student, you should try to go through all of the various steps. The first, getting the flow, getting the action as simple lines. As I'm doing this, I'm checking where things are. Visualizing the directions of space. I'm taking and giving this shoulder area, upper part, a bit slightly tilted back to show the contrast between the buttocks areas, but I'm also looking to see where we are vertically. Okay, simple volumes. Feel the rhythm of the figure, the legs go down. Here, buttocks, getting this pushing leg, pushing in, through, down, feeling the arms raised up and look across to see where the elbow is, through, arm coming up, hand, in, over the surface and back, trim down the head a bit. Now, again, actually trying to draw the rib cage, which is my basic volume. Checking alignments through. You draw one side of the form, you immediately go to the other side. So we can actually now feel there's a going back. Now this back view really becomes very, very clearly a volume, a simple spherical form. And of course, in this pose, particularly with this model, the buttocks area, the lower pelvis area, also starts out as being very, very simple volume. Now, as we take and go through that, from there, I really focus on seeing and visualizing the whole buttocks area as a simple box type form that is going into the picture. So we're thinking across, I use the dimples across the pelvis as a way of seeing the angle the form is going. Now, come through, her left leg has got the pressure, so I emphasize the straightness, and the other side is relaxed. So I'm taking and dropping down. Now, as I come to the back of the knee, I'm going across. I actually think of the line across here as a box form. I'm visualizing that knee and looking for the corner through spherical forms. I actually taking in, as I'm drawing, I actually am drawing and thinking of anatomy. So now here, it really becomes useful with the idea of the box to take and show the tilt and the angle that we're going in space. Really? Spherical forms through cylinders. Now, here, think of the scapula builds on top, so I'm taking and actually thinking now of the pull. This goes in, drawing the shape of the scapula on top, and we feel the trapezius muscle going over to the neck. Okay. Looking for the points, coming across, through,
okay, pulling down. Now, I'm drawing this arm, both of these now, by taking and really try to see that there is actually a corner to this thing. So I'm really visualizing this as a box form that is going in this direction. And so that the end of the scapula now is part of that box. And we can feel the deltoids taking and coming across so that we actually feel a corner here, coming around through, and we feel then the muscles pulling off of the rib cage over to the arm. Now going back, going over, look at the condyles. I try to visualize where condyles are going. Stop, Kel. Okay, now, so I'm actually, as I'm looking at the condyles, I'm feeling the corners of the form. It helps me to see which way I'm going, and as in the last drawing, I look at the wrists as squarish forms and think of these as simple solids going through. Then I take and start to build the volumes building on top. Now, we go back to there, we're going to come back in feeling the spine, and as I was drawing here the diagram for the pelvis, we're obviously seeing the buttocks area has become the bottom, it's going in. Then we feel the rib cage is going up. So if I go back now, I want to feel these corners. Feel this is pushing in, this is fitting in. You start to feel these going behind. So I'm looking for the corners now. When they come through, the corner actually is coming across. So as I would go farther with this, I would be thinking across the corner here. I'm taking and I would be visualizing this as having a change in direction. We're going from the top, we're going down in. So as I work around that corner then, I would be taking and pulling the form and dropping this form down so I could actually even be dropping this in tone as I'm doing. So you can see immediately that what direction that form is going now. And same thing on the other side, even though the outside contour is very round, I am always looking for the inside corner, feeling the corner coming across and pulling around. So in a sense, even though I've started out with very round forms, I'm still using the concept of the box as having very definite corners. So as you're building on these things, and you're always focusing on this roundness of the form, you're taking, it's round, but it's got corners. You take and start to visualize here to emphasize that there's some kind of twisting going on here. I would start to push the idea that this has a corner. So this becomes like the section of a box then. And in fact, the box had a slightly tilted back, so I would be pushing this idea coming through so that we have the side here and we feel the box going here. So if I start to render this, I would be focusing then on the corner of that as we're going in. Each element then has its top, its side, top, bottom, and side. So the head, again, would be thought of as a box form, having things so that rounding it off, I'm still thinking of the corner. So I would be dropping all of this into tone. And the hair, of course, is doing a nice thing of wrapping around and showing the form. Okay. Okay, now, this is a actually rather ideal pose for taking and working with overlapping volumes. To start with, and what I'm doing now, when I look at this, what I'm focusing on, and just very, very, very simply, just diagram this out a little bit, what we think of is this volume, the head, think of the whole rib cage area is another simple volume. The pelvis is also a very, very simple volume. In this case, I'm starting out with the idea of seeing it as a spherical form. But of course, when we look at it, you can see that there's the boxes, the corners, the form. So this becomes a series of simple overlapping volumes. So now as I draw this, I'm taking that in as my departure point. And I'm really thinking about where the overlapping is through the rib cage. And the danger with this is that you can make her standing on her head. I have to be careful now that I don't make the rib cage extended out too far. So we're really thinking, now I'm thinking of the center. The thoracic arch would be where we start to feel the corners. Now, feeling the pelvis, it's fitting in. So I'm looking at verticals, where it is in relationship to the head. Go through, right across. First, it's a two-dimensional point. I'm coming through and visualizing this full volume. Now, from here, I'll take and look for the corners of the pelvis coming across here. Notice that we have a real strong tilt now. The minute I look to that, and you can visualize this as a box, you really feel this corner going through. And in contrast to the rib cage itself, which is really going at an angle like this. Now, adding the legs become, first I'm taking now, going back to feeling the gesture, going back in through it. Feel the foot, the other side coming through, back, pulling down, and I really visualize now these as simple volume first. This. The knee, the leg is really defined by seeing it as a box. And really feel the corner of the form. Corner, then we're going back in and around, drawing through as if the model was made out of glass. You'll hear the same thing now. Simple volume. Legs are going back away from us, over the surface. But I look at the knee and see that, again, is a simple squarish form, which helps to show the direction that is going in space, which way it's turning. Now, same thing going back into the ankle. Now, in this case, I will draw the ankle as a squarish form and visualize the calf going round, going down, foot behind, going through, yeah. Now, same thing now applies. We visualize where the arm is. I see first, taking and literally sort of drawing this out more as a cylinder form to start with, but I'll immediately go to the idea of going across the condyles, thinking of the end of the ulna, and again, visualizing the wrist as a square form or oval, where we feel the pull around, it's going through, in, through. First, the gesture. I look to how far out that elbow is coming. Through. The arm is coming straight out towards us this way, so I'm looking at overlapping forms now. Through. Pull in. Thinking of the attachments, we pull off of the rib cage. Through. So I'm being very systematic now in the way I'm taking and approaching the drawing. I'm not looking for extraordinary bit of action here now. I'm really trying to just construct a figure very carefully. But still, this is very quick. Now the head is facing out this way. Go across the form, coming through. Now, if I go back into this, I take in, for instance, the breast become elements that we can use to help show the direction of the figure. We're dealing with overlapping volumes. Through overlapping volumes. I'm pushing the corners now of the rib cage. I want to feel pull, feeling the thoracic arch coming through. And I'm doing this, we want to feel this spherical form. It's going back, it's going down in. The actual bottom of the corner of the rib cage is down below here. Now you can see as I'm adding a little bit of tone, we're getting the feeling where this is taking and stepping down. And now we take and focus on getting this overlapping forms that I started with up here. Now we try to see that we're pulling, and she's actually stretching now, feeling a pull across. I'm going to emphasize this by giving a little bit more twisting, feeling that line coming through here. Feel the corner, pelvis. This really is stepping down. This really is like the corner of a box now. You feel that edge. You feel these forms going underneath. So it's corners. Corners, one fitting into another. And as we progressively go through it, the focus in the drawing then becomes one of showing those overlaps, making everything very clearly what comes in front, what is behind, and looking for corners. That's the beginning.
And let's do some poses here. We can show how this is applied. A little straighter, just something like that. That's good. That's great. Now this is a very simple pose here. And what I want to do is take and, I'm not going to try to go very far with this. I just want to take and show how we use these ideas I'm talking about to very simply take and start to clarify where the forms are in space. First, of course, we take and concentrate on getting the action. Now, repeating what we've covered before is that this line that I'm putting down is not necessarily a contour line or a single stick figure down the center, but it sort of communicates the flow of the action itself without taking and trying to copy any one point in the drawing. Now, as I take and develop this, now I come up, for instance, here we see the arm, shoulder is not necessarily attached, it's just really taking and showing where the forms are taking and going. Now, here's where I start to come in and clarify. Everything we're doing here now is to clarify the volume, direction of the forms. So now first I'm taking and saying, well, okay, an ellipse is going around. I'm taking and establishing the pit of the neck. And though we haven't talked about cylinders, I'm going to take and start to work using a simple cylinder. So we start to feel how this is fitting in. The rib cage now is that simple volume. We've talked about the symmetry, how we take and feel the stretching from one side and the pushing down on the other side. So we're containing that form very clearly. Now, coming into the pelvis, the box really is the simplest and clearest way to take and define this area. So what I do is I look for the corner of the pelvis, going through, feeling the other side, and I'm trying to see the direction of that form. Now, it's going back in. Now, it really isn't necessary that you always are drawing boxes and cylinders. The idea is to have a sense, and when you get to the point that you can actually see these things clearly looking at the model, then you use them without necessarily having to draw the box. Now I want to take and feel on this side, we're feeling a stretch coming through. Now, one thing I didn't cover when we were taking and just describing what was going on here is that not all the figures, of course, are just very, very simple. Everything isn't just a simple spherical form and a box. Now, in this case, you'll see that we have spheres on top of boxes fitting into other spheres. Like for instance here, there is actually a roundish form now that takes and pulls over this form. So we have to feel the corners of the box pulling in, and we start to see now, like the folds that are coming around here are really like cylinders that take and wrap around the form and combine and work with this. So when we start working with combinations of one form fitting into the other, but still the box is the way of taking and seeing it. So now I feel the corner of the rib cage pulling up here. I start with a simple sphere. I'm pulling from the rib cage, taking and pulling over, feeling the stomach coming down, and pulling all the way to the pubic arch at this point in here. I visualize these forms now on the side. This side is stretching. Over here, we're getting a squishing. And there's a slight twist taking place, so we start to see how these forms take and come over and pull across the figure at this point. Now, here you're getting a pressure pushing out. So now, this corner here we see very clear that this is where the corner of the form begins. But now, as we start to pull out, we start to again start to combine spherical forms fitting into this box type form. Now, as we work down the leg, we're taking and thinking, oh, this is very round, spherical, but the box, as we saw in our last lesson, really is the ideal way to take and show the direction of the form. So at this point, I would actually start to be thinking again of the squareness or the boxiness, combining the spherical form with the box form to take and show the direction of that leg. So these become really, really tools now. We're really making a point out of seeing that these are visual tools that we use to take and show the rondos. Now as I start to work around the calf, feel it's pulling down, coming through, and constructing the figure. Again, at the ankle, I would see the front of the ankle is tending to be square, like I did the knee up here, but at the same time, it's a horseshoe type shape that goes over the foot itself. Now, the other leg is going away from us. And here we're going to feel forms cutting underneath. As this leg turns away, we're still starting out with a very simple volume. One side of the form to the other. This side to that. And continuous going from one side to the other. Here we can see now the corner of that pelvis. It makes very clear how this fits into here. Now, this leg that's going away from me, I need to take and be able to look that this is going at an angle. And so again, the box becomes a means of taking and seeing that corner, which helping to show what the direction of this is. And so it goes away. I would actually probably take and maybe push even a little bit more to start seeing the little perspective in here as that goes underneath, and we can feel the muscles in the back taking and pulling down. So we get a forcing of this away. Coming down into the lower part of the leg then, and now again the volume, seeing these large calf muscles. These are spherical forms again that take and come down, and we pull into the foot, and looking down, I want to take, and again, I would try to be clear by looking across that ankle and seeing that this is a box or a section of a box that's going away from me like this, and then it's not a perfect square type form, but it's seeing that front like I was doing here, seeing that this is an angle, this has a flatness to it. Well, this is it's going away, has a flatness to it. And that from there, I would be taking and trying to visualize the side coming down. So if I was carrying it a little bit farther, I would be saying, well, the back of the heel here is sort of square down here, and we start to see now the foot coming through. Now, it's important that you don't think of this as any kind of rules. That these are really tools to help you see what you're looking at. Now, as I start to look at, say, the shoulders here, well, I can begin by saying, well, this is a round type form here. Now, but that doesn't do an awful lot for helping me to see how the shoulder is coming around. Again, in the last session, we saw how seeing the whole upper part of the torso as a box gave us a very clear indication of what direction the form was going. Now, I can take, without drawing all of that as a box, but seeing the rib cage here and taking and visualizing the end of the shoulder here as a end of a box type form that's coming around. Now, as we'll see in the next lesson, is that the cylinder is really sort of almost an ideal way to take and deal with the arm. But the actual anatomy is such that the scapula coming around, the end of the scapula is very, very square. And so we actually combine this spherical type form with the box and start to feel how the deltoid, for instance, takes and comes around. Then we find at this point that the pectoralis muscles now will be coming down and fitting into the chest. Now, part of the thing is we've been talking about pretty much boxes and as a pelvis and a rib cage as a sphere. But you find that the box also fits into the rib cage. As we found in the last lesson, the corner of the rib cage really is, so in a sense, the side of a box, and that starts to show that side of the form. So we're combining spheres with boxes as we start to take and develop this form. So you're always trying to see where the change in the direction of the surface is. So as I take and even the head here, I would find that I would take and start to look for the corner of that box. So try to find, in this case, that corner becomes where the corner of the temple is coming down. We actually feel the corner of the cheekbone here. And in reality, of course, it's not a box we find here, but the looking for that corner helps us to orientate where that head is in space. Now I want to take and do a different pose here. Let's take and turning the other way here. Okay, just not take the hands away there so we can see pelvis. Okay. Now, okay, this is not that dissimilar from the last pose, but it shows a few new things now. Okay, again, starting out. The head is a simple form. Now here, just even as I'm blocking this in and looking at it, what I think about actually before I even get anywhere near to actually drawing is as I look at the model, I see the line across the brow, and I see the angle going back towards where the ear would be. And again, this is essentially visualizing the head as a box type form, so that you have a very clear idea of the direction that the form is going. Now, getting here, I try to get first it's the action. First it's really feeling the rhythm and the flow of the figure. So you see a very, very definite movement. We look across, we see where the shoulder is at here, the arm coming down, this arm pushing, dropping down through, and here the other leg is dropping and going back down here. Now, I want to take and primarily talk a little bit, bring a little anatomical thought into here. And at first you can say, well, okay, we've got the rib cage, and that is our simple spherical form. Visualizing what I'm doing is containing a volume. Now, as I come down, I look for the corner of that pelvis, and using the box as a way of seeing or of analyzing form, I think about where is it going back in this direction. Now she's really pushing her hip out there. So what you want to look at now is that, okay, first let's just carry this through. We've got, again, we're getting a very strong contrast between the one side and the other. You can feel this taking and pulling through, and there's a pressure being created against that pelvis. The other side of the rib cage lifting up, you would have the corner of the rib cage here taking and coming down. So we were feeling this is pushing down this way. We feel this is pushing up. We're getting the pinch in between. Now, as the pelvis is pushing up in here, and we're getting this action, well, this is also taking and forcing the stomach out. So we feel the fullness being pulled out in here. Now it's important to look and to see, in looking at the model, is to see that this corner here is a very real point, not just a convenience for diagramming the figure. It's a real spot of anatomy. Now let me take and explain what this is here now. When you look at the skeleton and you start to see as the pelvis takes and goes around. Okay, at this point, and let's say we come down from here down to the pubic arch, this spot, we feel where the bone of the great trochanter here of the femur pulls down. That what you have are a series of muscles to take. You have a tensor muscle which pulls across from here and pulls across over to the leg. You have a sartorius muscle that takes and pulls from this point, coming down and ties down below the knee. And what you find, and there's a tendon that takes and pulls to the pubic arch over here. But what goes on here is that all of the major muscles of the part of the leg here, so the big teardrop-shaped muscles that we see here, that are your gastrocnemius. I mean, excuse me, rectus femoris muscle that takes and pulls through in between this point here. So what you get is a relatively flat space in between. So this point right here then is being created. The side of that box really is, in the sense, the side of this where this tensor muscle comes through, and where the sartorius would start here, and the rectus femoris then is fitting inside. So when you're looking at the model, you see this big curve, but what's also now we're talking, this is a volume in here. And so we start to visualize that these abstract shapes that we're working with are really taking and helping us to see anatomical elements, like the buttocks muscles here take and pull out from this point here. Now, what this brings me to the point here is that what I'm talking about here, and which I started out this lesson discussing, was that you have to learn to see these as real physical things, taking and pushing and stretching against each other. So that when I'm drawing this, I don't see this just as a series of lines, but I see this as a real form that's taking and pushing down, and this is really squashing up against this. Because at this point, the pelvis, as this pelvis comes through, you have all of the muscles that are taking and pulling up here. Let's diagram this even a little more. So you can see the relationship a little bit here of the abstract and the real. Now, what you have in the front here, of course, we have the stomach muscles which take and pull down and attach to the pubic arch. Okay. On the sides, we have, if you look at the rib cage from the side, pelvis from the side here, as the rib cage comes down, we have from the side of the pelvis here, we have a series, or a muscle here, coming down your external oblique. In other words, which comes from up here and takes and attaches through here. Well, this is attached to the rib cage and attaches to the pelvis. When you take and bend this, you are actually taking and squashing that muscle, and on the other side here, taking and stretching it. So we're really dealing not with just abstract ideas here, but we're really dealing with how the physical reality of the thing works. Now let's take and how about a okay, now let's take and start another one here. Now we've got the model going away from us. So again, I start with the head. Back here thinking of a simple volume. But really, at this point, I'm already seeing, and here again, I would probably start to think this is sort of a square type form that helps to show the direction more clearly. Now, I pull back into the figure again, pulling around. And what I want to concentrating on is the relationship of spheres and boxes and how we work with those in terms of the arms and the limbs a little bit. Now first we've got the volume of the rib cage. And again, I would take and be seeing the pelvis here as sort of a box type form. Going down. And remember now, as I said earlier, that it's not always necessary to be drawing a box, but the box is a tool that helps you to see. So if you're not having any problems with seeing the volume, then you don't particularly draw it. Now, here, I come through and looking at the arms. First, okay, we've got the arm coming out, and I start to feel the elbow is pulling way out here. Now, you look at the arm, the end of the elbow really, again, becomes a convenient thing to use a box type form to take and show the direction. It helps to see more clearly how that arm is coming and how it is twisting. In fact, I would take this down and I would take and be using the box as a way of depicting a wrist come through. Now, I've sort of jumped here to show the different points that I would be taking and working with. Now, what you're actually looking at when you're drawing this part of the box, of the elbow here, that you're actually looking at the condyles of the bone. And then in between here, we get the end of the ulna, which is taking and sticking out. So that becomes, again, another corner that we start to look for. Within that, then we start to see these simple volumes of the arm as they start to come down to the wrist. Now, again, the upper part of the arm, I would be doing the same thing. Think of this as a cylindrical type form first, but I would be building on top of this rib cage that volumes of the scapula itself, And again, thinking of the top of the shoulder up here is a bit squarish, where the scapula comes across and the deltoid starts to pull out of it. Now, on the other side, if you start seeing the same thing, now, if that scapula goes back away, I start to visualize that part of the shoulder again as the end of a box. And start to pull, so that corner right here, again, starts to show a directional thing. That I would then start to build the volumes, taking and working on that. So I'm going to take and just do a couple of different arms here, Marianne. I'm going to take and, that was good, just like what you're doing with that. Okay, now I want to take and show, I'm going to do this very simply to start with. I'm going to take and right away, I'm going to jump into the basic simple volumes here first. You can see how what we've been talking about becomes not only a way of seeing, but very simply taking and indicating the figure coming through, thinking of the corner of the pelvis here. You see I'm already thinking of this box form, feeling these forms going over the surface, feeling the pressure that's being created in here. Shoulder, arm is taking, coming back, going in, going down. I'm taking and seeing the end of the shoulder here as a box type form coming down. Now, remember in the first part of this lesson, I made a real point out of talking about seeing the inside corner. And this is a perfect example. In other words, the outside of the arm here is coming down through here, and we see this sort of a shape doing something like this. Well, in reality, the thing, if we were to continually emphasize these outside contours here, it would really give a false impression of the form. And because the corner of the form is actually in here, the part that is actually facing us is right here. So now, as I come up here and I start to see the end of this shoulder, I'm looking for the inside corner of this form so that we feel this is fitting down. Now, you get the pectoralis muscles pulling off of the rib cage coming over here. And I come back down to the bottom, or they should say the end here. Again, we're talking about seeing the corners. I'm coming across the condyles. I was talking before. Seeing the end of the ulna coming up to here. So as we work with this, we start now see square form. We're also dealing with our basic volumes. I'm giving her a few more muscles than she's got, but that won't hurt any. Now, when you look at the wrist, again, if I was just taking and drawing this as a simple cylinder, or just coming down and drawing the outside contours here, we have very little sense of what is actually going on with that. But the minute I come in and start to think about these inside corners a little bit, we start to see a little more clearly of how these forms take, what direction the form is taking, and we start to build the hand, for instance, starts coming on top of this, start to feel the hand going over the surface. Now, with this squareness going through here, and we start to feel the volume taking and coming through and around that surface again. So again, we're combining the square type form with a spherical type form in smaller parts. Let's try a different angle of the arm here now. Let's just take, okay, that's good, just like that. Now we're just taking and turning around so that you can see how this takes and works in a different angle. Actually, I'm going to draw the other arm here. Now, one element of this, since what we're doing with these spheres and boxes is we're taking and creating a sense of visual structure to the form. In other words, we're trying to, and it's not always anatomical. What we try to do is give a sense of solidity to the drawing. So I'm just going to take and drawing this arm coming through here, and when I start to
diagram this or construct it, say using the idea of the box, I'm also using a very, very simple idea of connecting the elements. In other words, I'll start with a corner here. Again, this was not, it's the same thing that we talked about already in terms of seeing corners, feeling simple volumes. Okay, but now I'm taking it a little differently, and I'm coming and say, well, I'm going to take this line here, and I'm going to get the eye to come down and see the end of the elbow here. Okay. Now, at the same time, I'm talking and thinking about this as being a box, and I'm seeing the other side of the box, so we actually have a corner here. But this line, which is essentially a two-dimensional line, but it's still showing the side of a box, is that we start now to feel, when I start to add these volumes onto this, you can take, and the volumes are much more clear by the contrast shown against that straight. Now, as this arm comes forward, the box of the wrist, as we start to visualize the end of this form, as I start to look at this corner going through here, again, I'm combining different elements here. I'll take this line and carry it through to here, but I'm also looking for the corner of the form on the inside here, and now seeing this as a box-type form, combining now this with a simple round spherical form. So this goes back to the first things we talked about, taking and dealing with the whole torso and being able to visualize these as three-dimensional forms. Now we're taking and dealing with that same idea, taking and first feeling the action. Remember, the action is the most important part of the flow figure. Shoulder lifting up, behind, coming back down, two. Okay. Now, don't get preoccupied to begin with and trying to be too perfect. It's really a generality to begin with, and you slowly develop the whole thing. But the idea is to see the total. Okay, now I'm through. I'm visualizing the volume of the rib cage, trying to see through here, thinking this is round. Okay, taking and now as I look at the whole pelvic area, I actually take and seeing this as a box type form that is going away from me, this way, coming through. Even if I don't always draw the box, I'm visualizing that box. And I use it to help me understand what is going on anatomically. You know, right from here, I say we have a round form. Now here, take like I would come through and I would draw the center. Start to feel how this comes through, picking up the corners of the sacrum back here where the pelvis comes and attaches. Again, those are elements that help us to see that box more clearly. Now, as I come around with the buttocks coming through in here, I'm working off this corner, and this is that tensor muscle I was talking about. But I have a very strong sense of that we have a definite corner that we are taking and going back around. Now, as I start to work into the leg here, very simply, again, volume, one form fitting into another form. As I'm coming down this way, I'm going to use the box. I'm thinking going across the back of the knee, fitting in, seeing very clear corner. So you can see how simply I'm taking and approaching the drawing. I'm just trying to see very, very simple, basic forms. Now, if you look at the drawings of Raphael or a Da Vinci, you find this type of thinking is very, very prevalent. Of taking and seeing elements is very, very simple volumes. Now, I'm getting a strong foreshortening here as I'm looking down at the model's feet. Okay. So I'm looking this whole perspective as the forms are going away from me, pushing down in space. So I'm seeing across the angle from here to here. So I use the box. Now, a lot of times when you're taking in, doing this, I can take this idea of the box and carry it right into actually taking and trying to diagram a bit of space on the ground to give you a sense of which way the figure is actually going. Now, I come through the shoulders, I'm looking across the shoulders, seeing this angle through here. Again, I'm looking at this as a box type form up here, coming through. I see the end of the shoulder, again, rather squarish. It's a way of helping me to see. Okay. Going around over the surface, going through. Now I build, in here, I would build scapulas, building on top of that rib cage. So I'm seeing one form on top of the other, shoulders building through. Now, since we have a model with drapery on, or clothes I guess is the normal way to say it. Now, for instance, that I would use the drapery to take and help show a lot of this dimension. First, I guess I should carry this head a little bit farther. Here again, I would be looking, helping look for the corners of the form. So I start to see how she's turning away and to start blocking in. The term even blocking in takes and tells us a lot about the idea of using boxes. So I start to feel how these elements are pulling one from the other. Now, like I said, I'm using the drapery. I would use the drapery as a way of wrapping around the figure, to take and start coming around, going over the surface, to feel forms, wrapping, going over, pulling it through, and feel going around and over the surface. We can see the seams taking and wrapping over and drawing around. Here, feel the breast coming down. You can see here, where I would want to show how the box and the sphere work together, I could take and start to use actually a seam, taking and coming through and pulling out. I can pull over these surfaces, feel the line working on the surface, pulling through. Hair becomes a way of taking and going over a surface, going over, around, through, behind. Everything is made to take and work over and around the figure. In the end, it may not look like boxes and spheres, and hopefully it doesn't. But as we build up, we realize that these are still the basic geometry that we take and use to take and construct a figure and to see it. The most useful place to take and work with spheres and boxes is in this kind of extreme foreshortening view. Now, this is it's incredibly useful. It's almost becomes a necessity. Now, let me take, and I'm going to take and go through this rather quickly and show you how I take and develop a figure in a fairly strong foreshortened view now. Start with, I would take and, as always, try to get the action, the total of the figure to begin with. Now, in doing this, I paid particular attention to the horizontal alignment of where the forms are. It can be very misleading to you. Now, for instance, as I look at the model, I see, for instance, her hip is actually on a line with the top of her eye here. So, and the shoulder is actually even higher.
So I have to keep that in mind as I'm doing this. Now, so I'm seeing coming through, this hip is pulling way up here, way up here. Then the leg is taking and dropping and coming down towards it. Now I'm fairly close to the model, so I'm getting quite a bit of distortion, just like the camera would. Now, as it comes through, thinking of going across, the arm going over here, and it's holding out our head. Now, in constructing this, I think of these spheres and boxes. Now, taking and, okay, we've already started with the head here, and that's fairly simple to begin with. Now, pit of the neck coming through. Now I start working with the rib cage. This is where in the first or the second lesson we talked about overlapping spheres. Now here's where you start to really use those forms. Now I'm going to first draw this as a series of simple overlapping spheres and combine this with the box. Now you can see this coming through here. Now at this point, here's where I need to say, well, this doesn't tell me everything. Here's where I would come in and I start to say, well, maybe I need at this point to clarify the angle here. So I would start to think of where this corner of the pelvis is and how we see, and we're actually looking at the bottom of the pelvis here. So we're seeing this box going away in space this way. Now the minute you start drawing this, you can start to sense how strong a directional force you get going. Now, pulling into here, I take and start to see, okay, now we really get the leg, thinking of this volume here. Also, I'd come back and say, well, we come through back here, we have a corner, this up coming through, we can see where the buttocks would be coming, the center of that box coming through. The other side is down here. Now this volume as it comes forward is taking and really moving out in this direction. I'm looking very carefully now at where the knee is coming across this way. Now with that leg turned, I can use, again, the box becomes the tool for taking and seeing that direction. And I'm using that word very specifically, calling it a tool. Now, as we come forward out here, again, now we start to see that we've changed direction here. We've got this as turns. So I'm really visualizing this change in here, and I've got to be careful of the thickness that I'm actually getting in here. Now, I'm purposefully being pretty extreme in doing this in terms of drawing the straights in the corners so you see the angles. Now we take and visualize the calf as a volume fitting into this again. Feel this coming through, going around, and the ankle's now pulling out of that, and I would start to see that ankle as, again, a squarish type of form. Through the foot coming out, and I look at this, I want to take, again, the two-dimensional part of it. I see, for instance, the little toe area is actually right close in here. And we start to pull back, feel the heel going back, and I've got to see this as a corner, inside corner again, that I keep talking about. Through, we feel the surface, two-dimensional shape here, but I'm now seeing the whole bottom of the foot, and we feel this plane going through. And that term plane, as we talked about in the last lesson, is one of the basic, that's a telling term. Planes are flat surfaces of forms. Now, here I'm taking some down. Now you can see the corner, how this whole form comes out. Now they come into the other knee out here. Again, first I'd look for the placement. I try to see how it's pulling out of this box up here, fitting back in, drawing transparent as if it's made out of glass. Coming forward, across the end. Now I have to sit there and think a little bit now exactly which way is that box going? How is that taking and turning? All my visualings. What is going on here with this form? Okay. And again, what creates the box here are the ends of the bone. Okay, we would see the patella coming out here, but first it's a big, simple form. Then coming through, and I see the round fitting into that. Coming back, pulling out. I look to see where the ankle is. When I look at the ankle, again, I look for the corner. I look for that inside corner of that form and how we get the change in that direction. And as I've said before, much of drawing really is taking and showing the change in the direction of a surface. Going across, feel, first I'm thinking up here, and looking at the very simple shape. And as I start developing that, it becomes a combination of seeing corners, boxes, cylinders, spheres. I use the whole toolbox of forms to take and create the illusion of reality, or the illusion of three-dimension at least. Now, as I start going back in, this way I start again. We've got the rib cage, this round form. Now I take a look again for the corners of that form that we can start to see where the change in direction. I start to visualize over that sphere. I'm also seeing it as a box. Now, the problem in the drawing is to show the distance between these elements. Now first, we see the shoulder pulling up into here. Going back to, at this point, I'm just drawing a rather two-dimensional shape. Out of my mind, I'm actually seeing this as a volume and thinking of how pectoralis muscles are pulling back and where the top corner of that form is. Now here, I need to take and come over, using that idea of the box, come over, start to see the corners, the overlapping, and to pull the forms out from behind it. So I'm really visualizing this three-dimensional space between these forms. And now the same thing would apply in here. I would start to take and add forms, start working over that surface. Start to feel volumes taking and pulling over the surface. So as you're doing the drawing then, you take and continually evaluate what you're looking at and see it as three-dimensional forms. I try to take and explain to my students that you draw in such a way that if it was necessary, a carpenter could take and construct your figure. That it should be completely clear dimensionally what is going on. There should be no ambiguity in the drawing. The drawing should be perfectly clear spatially, how the forms are fitting one into the other. In our next lesson, we will be taking and going into the use, which I've already started doing here, is in terms of working with the cylinder and how the cylinder takes and becomes part of this whole tool box that we have, the forms that we work with. And as you can see that nothing works just by itself. Everything works together, and you keep modifying these points.